Hi guys, so we're going to wrap up one more thing with greatest common factor with a word problem, and then we're going to jump into least common multiple. So with this application problem, it says you stand straight up in the air on a trampoline. Your height, y in feet above the trampoline after t seconds can be multiplied by y equals negative 16t squared plus 18t. How many seconds are you in the air? Okay, so when we think about this, your height above the ground after t seconds is modeled by this polynomial, okay, in this equation. So when you're at ground level, so I want you to think about what's happening here. Here you are, you're at ground level, okay, and what's happening is you're jumping up and down on the trampoline, okay, and it's modeled by this polynomial right here. Okay, so when you're at ground level, right here, ground level is y equals 0. Okay, so we haven't done anything. Okay, the t stands for time. Okay, and how many seconds you have progressively been on this trampoline. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on in this problem. And then we want to figure out how many seconds you have been in the air. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to break down this polynomial using greatest common factor, and then we're going to see overall how much time you've been there. So we're going to set this equal to 0 because this is ground level. Since y stands for our ground level, t is going to be our time. So we'll say t is kind of like our x-axis, and that'll be seconds. Okay? Negative 16t squared plus 18t. Okay? And this is our height, just so you guys know. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor this. So over here to the side, I'm going to do my upside down division to get the greatest common factor. Now I have a negative leading coefficient. That's okay. Let's see. I'm going to try and get rid of it right now. So I'm going to divide out maybe a negative 2 to get rid of it. So negative 16 divided by negative 2 will give me positive 8. And then 18 divided by negative 2 will get me a negative 9. I'm going to drop down my t squared and my t. Largest amount of t's I can take out. 1. And I'm going to drop these guys down as well. Okay, so it looks like the greatest common factor here is negative 2t, and then I have 8t minus 9. Okay, and we're going to set that equal to 0. We're going to set each one of these equal to 0 and solve, and then I'm going to tell you what we're finding here. So whenever I set this one equal to 0, I get t is equal to 0, so our time in seconds is 0. And this one, when we solve, we add 9 to both sides, and then we divide by 8. So we would get 9/8, but when you actually figure that is as a decimal, because 9/8 doesn't really make sense to me right now, it would be 1.125 seconds. Well, if you think about what you actually have right here, there's 2 answers. Makes sense that there's 2 answers because if you look right here, there's 2 places that we actually hit the x-axis, okay? We hit right here at 0, and we would hit right here at 1.125. So what this is showing you is it's showing you how many seconds total you're in the air. So we start out here at 0, and we're moving all the way in the air, right? And it's elapsed at 1.125 seconds. So how many total seconds are you in the air? We really don't want both of these answers. Okay, we can kind of rule out this answer right here because this is what's happening when you're starting the problem, right? So we're going to say the only answer for this one is 1.125 seconds. Okay, so the final answer, guys, for that one is 1.125 seconds. All right, now we're going to move on to least common multiple. You'll be asked some questions on your keystone about how to find a least common multiple between 2, maybe monomials, maybe 3, okay? We're going to do this with upside down division, okay? Just like we did with least common multiple. So I'm going to find the 4xy squared, the 2x squared y to the third. And we're going to start out looking for the biggest number that we can divide out, but we actually find least common multiple in a slightly different way. So right now I'm just looking at the numbers. So between a 4 and a 2, biggest number I can divide out is a 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. Drop down x y squared. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I'm just going to drop down the x squared and a y to the third. Okay, next thing, I'm going to take a look at my variables. Okay, with my variables, I have an x and I have an x squared. Biggest amount I can divide out is the x. Okay, so dropping down the 2. If I had an x and took an x out, they're gone. So I'm going to drop down the y squared. If I had 2 x's and I took 1 out, there's 1 left over, and there's still a y to the third. Now I still have a y in common to both of these. So I got to keep going. So I can take out the biggest amount, so I can take out 2 y's. So if I had 2 y's, I took them out, there's none left over. Dropping down my x. If I had 3 y's and I took 2 out, there's 1 left over. Okay, now, where do you find your answer for a least common multiple? Well, since a least common multiple starts with the letter L, you have to multiply the outside factors that you have to find the least common multiple. And here's what we do. I circle them, make it look like an L so I remember it, and then we're actually going to multiply these numbers up. So right now, look at just the numbers, so the coefficients. So look at 2 and 2. 2 times 2 gives you 4. Okay, so I've used those ones. Okay, now, and I'm going to just scribble them out for right now that I know that I've used them. Okay, now let's move on to the x's. X and x. X times x is going to give you x squared. Or how many total x's do you have? You have 2 of them, right? So x times x, or keep your base, add your exponents, right? X squared. And then if we look at our y's, y squared and a y. So how many total? You have 2 here and 1 here. So y to the third. So the least common multiple would be 4x squared y to the third. Okay, so there would be your answer for the first question. Okay, I'm going to erase this just to get some space. So let's take a look at question 2. Remember in the L. All right, we have negative 9a to the third b and 12a squared bc. Okay. All right, now, biggest amount that I can divide out looks like probably a 3. I'm also going to take the negative sign with it. All right, so I have a negative 3. Negative 9 divided by negative 3 is going to give me a positive 3. And I'm going to drop down a cubed and a b. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. And then let's see here, a squared b c. Okay, we're going to do the variables now. Let's one at a time. Biggest amount of a's, a squared. Drop down the 3. If you had 3 a's, you took out 2. There's 1 left. Drop down the b. Drop down the negative 4. If you had 2 a's, you took 2 out. They're gone. Drop down the b. Drop down the c. Okay, now we're moving on to the b's. Biggest amount of b's you can take out, 1. Okay, so if I take out the b's, see if I have 3a left over, there's a minus 4, and there's a c. There's no c's in common to both, so we are done. Okay, I am going to circle the L because it's a least common multiple, and we're going to multiply up to get our least common multiple. So to get that, we're going to do negative 3 times 3 times negative 4. So negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. Negative 9 times negative 4 is going to give me positive 36. Okay, so I've used these. Okay, now I'm looking for my A's. So if you have 2 and 1, that'll give you a total of 3. 1B and 1C. So least common multiple is 36, a to the third, BC. Okay, let's try out one with 3. Okay, let's try out number 3. 5xy, 15x squared, z, and 10y squared. Let's go with the numbers first. 5 first. 5 divided by 5, 1. Drop down your xy. 3. And then 2. Okay, nothing in common to all 3, but if you have 2 in common, it could keep going. I don't have 2 in common, so I'm going to keep just going on with the variables. Okay, x's. Now, this is what I was talking about. With the x's, you have an x in common to both the first term and the second term, but you don't have anything in that last term that it's common with. Technically, with greatest common factor, we would be done right now. But because it's least common multiple, we can actually keep on going. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out an x because it's common to the first two, and I'm going to circle this one and just drop it down. Because for least common multiple, it has to work out of at least 2 of them. If it doesn't, you just drop it down. Okay? So xy, dropping down a y, 3x, z. Okay. Now I'm going to look and see, is there any x's in common to all 3? Nope. Any x's in common to 2? Nope. So I'm going to move on to the y's. All right. With the y's, I see it's in common in the first and in the last, but not the second term. So I'm going to circle that, bring it down. Okay, I have a y that I can divide out. So y divided by y is 1. 2y squared divided by y is 2y. And again, looking to see if there's any more y's in common to all. There's not. So I'm moving on to my z's. I don't see a z in common to anything, so I am done. So now what I'm going to do is circle my L, and I'm going to start multiplying. So 5 times 1 times 3 times 2. 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 3 is 15, and 15 times 2 is 30. Now we're going to move on to the x's. I see 1x, 2x's, so x squared. Moving on to the y's, I see 1y, I see 2y's, so y squared. And then in terms of the z's, I just see 1, so z. So 30x squared, y squared, z would be your answer for this one. Okay, let's move on. Let's try one more that's like that. Okay, you have 16m, negative 12m squared n, and 8n squared. Divide by 4. Okay, can't divide by 4, but I could divide technically by 2 because it would work for the first and the last. So I'm going to circle this and bring it down. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the m's. I see an m in common in the first and second, but not in the last. So I'm going to drop it down. Okay, same thing with the n's. circling the first, bringing it down. Okay, and again, checking the last to see if there's anything in common to all three, or at least two of them. There's not, so I'm going to circle the L to get our answer. So 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. And 16 times -3 is going to give me -48. Then I'm moving on to the letters, or the variables. So m times m is giving me m squared. And then the n's, n and n, give me n squared. So there's your least common multiple. So just to kind of make sure you understand this, with a least common multiple, you can keep going if it works with at least 2. You just circle and drop it down. With greatest common factor, it has to work for everything. If it doesn't work for everything, you stop, okay? Least common multiple is a little different, okay? So I want you guys to take a look at these, okay? And we're going to take a look and see if we can come up with them also. So try these out, and then we'll see if we come up with the right answers.